Vietnam and the Philippines, two nations that, on the surface, are actually quite similar, twinned in a way. Both were colonized by extractive foreign powers. Both were utterly devastated by war. Both emerged into the Cold War poor, unstable, and deeply dependent on the outside world. But ultimately, one is rising from the ashes, while one continued to build a house made out of it and pretended it was fine. This video isn't about culture, it's not about intelligence, and it's definitely not about who deserves to succeed. It's about choices. Because at one point in history, Vietnam and the Philippines were close enough in their starting positions that the gap between them today can't just be explained by luck alone. So the question isn't why Vietnam succeeded. The real question is why the Philippines didn't. If we look back some 50 or 40 years ago, to the late 70s and 80s, Vietnam and the Philippines had roughly the same conditions. By that, both were poor, post-colonial states with weak industrial bases and limited room to maneuver. While the Philippines was slightly ahead due to its lead in the 50s and 60s at the time being considered Asia's second richest nation by GDP per capita, only behind Japan impressively enough, thanks to US support, slight industrialization, and a young, educated Anglophone workforce. By the 1980s, however, this had mostly worn off. The country was in the grips of martial law, an era defined by excessive corruption, crony capitalism, nepotism, and political persecution, moves that handicapped the Philippines for decades moving forward. Initially, the country showed high growth in the early 1970s, hitting 8.9% in 1973 and 8.8% in 1976. However, this was mostly debt-fueled and was not used to build sustainable industries. By 1983, the economy collapsed. After the assassination of one of the country's foremost political figures, Ninoy Aquino, the economy declined significantly at a rate of -7% in 84 and -6.9% in 85. While ignited by political instability, structural factors such as the country's massive debt, a fall in the price of exports such as sugar, coconut, and timber, and the IMF's prescribed policies for the Philippines accelerated the collapse. Vietnam, meanwhile, was emerging from a very different crisis. The country had only just reunified in 1975 after decades of war, leaving its economy devastated. Infrastructure was destroyed, productivity was low, and Vietnam remained largely isolated from global markets under Cold War sanctions. Living standards were extremely low, and the state struggled to provide even basic goods. Neither country had an easy path forward. Vietnam was emerging from decades of war. The Philippines, meanwhile, while more urbanized and globally connected, struggled with elite dominance and fragile institutions. Neither was set up to win, but neither was doomed as well. By 1986, both had a choice, but only one of them ended up on the greener side of the grass. In 1986, Vietnam launched the Doi Moi, meaning renovation or innovation, a process with the goal of transitioning from a mainly agrarian command economy to a socialist-oriented market economy. Essentially, from the government telling people what the price is for their shit and how much they can only sell this shit, it's now the people choosing what to buy and sell. Capitalism at its finest though. Under Doi Moi, collective farms were dismantled, farmers could sell excess at market prices, and land remained state-owned, but households kept surpluses. Private enterprise was gradually legalized, SMEs were promoted, and prices were liberalized. SOEs became more competitive after the government cut subsidies and forced a shift towards export and manufacturing. FDIs were encouraged, but were not the backbone of the economy either. They were limited to industries that suited the government's policies, such as manufacturing and tech transfer. All orchestrated by a central government that, while not free, they were very pragmatic and excelled at getting the work done by setting priorities and targets, forcing provinces to meet production quotas, and keeping a stable, predictable economic policy. Thanks to Doi Moi, Vietnam underwent a miraculous economic transformation in the 1990s, beginning its rise from a poor, war-torn country into a modern-day manufacturing powerhouse. The result was not instant prosperity, but structural momentum. Between 1986 and 1980, growth averaged 4.4% annually. From 1990 to 1997, it accelerated to around 6.5% before being interrupted by the Asian financial crisis. Vietnam's GDP grew roughly fivefold during the 1990s, while GDP per capita rose from under $100 to nearly $400 by the year 2000. Vietnam did not become rich overnight, but it became productive. The Philippines, meanwhile, went on a different path. A worse path! In the Philippines, the response to the crisis took the form of liberalization without coordination. Following the debt collapse in the early 1980s and the end of the Marcos regime, the country opened its economy under IMF and World Bank guidance. Tariffs were reduced, capital controls loosened, and markets liberalized. While good for mature, developed economies with already thriving industry, these policies had significant negative long-term effects in the Philippines, even if in the short term they were very beneficial, especially in ending different crises such as the power crisis in Luzon, which resulted in rotating blackouts across the island. Unlike Vietnam, this liberalization was not paired with a coherent industrial strategy. Manufacturing was not prioritized, state capacity remained weak, and policy direction shifted under each administration. Rather than absorbing labor into domestic production, the Philippine economy increasingly relied on external safety valves. Overseas labor migration expanded rapidly. Remittances supported consumption and stabilized household incomes, but they also reduced pressure to reform wages, upgrade industry, or build export capacity at home. By the 1990s, the incentives in each system had diverged completely. In Vietnam, growth depended on expanding production, absorbing labor, and exporting manufactured goods. In the Philippines, growth depended on consumption, services, and external income flows. One system rewarded making things, the other rewarded coping. Today, both countries are still rapidly growing. Both have young populations. Both still have incredibly high ceilings for what they could become in the future. What's different? The engines of growth and the sustainability of that growth. On paper, Vietnam and the Philippines today look surprisingly close. Both have economies in the $400 billion range. Both are considered middle-income countries. Both have posted solid growth over the past 2 decades. But once you look past the headline numbers, the difference becomes obvious, not in how fast they grew, but in how they grew. Vietnam's economy is built around production. Manufacturing today accounts for roughly a quarter of Vietnam's GDP, one of the highest shares in Southeast Asia. Factories producing electronics, machinery, garments, and industrial components absorb millions of workers, many of them from rural areas. Exports tell the same story. Nearly 90% of Vietnam's exports are manufactured goods. Phones, semiconductors, machinery, not just assembly, but increasingly complex production embedded in global supply chains. As productivity rose, wages followed. Growth wasn't instant, and it wasn't painless, but it was structural. The economy expanded by making more things, selling them abroad, and pulling labor into higher productivity work. The Philippines, meanwhile, followed a different trajectory. Today, manufacturing makes up less than 1/5 of the economy, smaller today than it was decades ago. Instead of expanding production, growth shifted towards services and consumption. Services now account for well over 60% of GDP. Business process outsourcing or BPO, retail, finance, and informal services became the backbone of growth. These sectors created income, but they did not absorb labor at the same scale or raise productivity in the same way manufacturing does. Exports reflect this structure. While the Philippines does export electronics, much of it remains low value-added assembly. At the same time, the country increasingly exports something else: labor. The outcomes are even visible in poverty reduction. In the early 1990s, Vietnam was one of the poorest countries in the world. Today, extreme poverty has fallen to low single digits, driven largely by rising rural productivity and manufacturing employment. The Philippines reduced poverty more slowly and unevenly. Growth lifted incomes, but inequality remained persistent and regional divides deepened. Growth happened, but it did not restructure the economy beneath it. But what does this mean for the Philippines? Today, the Philippines is not collapsing. It is not stagnant at all. It is growing. Call centers, tourism, retail, all do provide growth. The Philippines is still one of the fastest growing economies in the world. It gives people jobs, grows GDP, so on and so on, you know the story. But it doesn't rapidly transform society in the same way steel and semiconductors do. The problem isn't the Philippines doesn't grow, it's that growth doesn't force transformation. For most of the post-EDSA years, nothing much has really changed. Things are faster, new technology comes in, the population grows, but life is still the same. The cause? Political incontinuity, elite capture, and a culture that permits these things to happen. Not because we don't believe we deserve better, but because we cannot imagine things getting any better at all. The Philippines today is a country that operates on 6-year cycles. New president, new plans. Things stall, yet renamed or get repurposed for their own pride. Great examples would include projects like the country's numerous infrastructure projects. Many times, projects start, get killed, or change form, depending on how the administration feels that day, such as in the North Rail project, or now known as the NSCR. The economy, run by elites who go off rent-taking, quite literally, many are involved in real estate, and funding continually profitable and sustainable ventures for themselves, but not for the country as a whole. This reinforces a loop. The economy grows, elites make money, people make money investing into these industries. But the growth is simply growth on paper and on the skyline. It's not growth that changes lives and the country by building infrastructure, electronics, or industrial machinery. The people? Tired, busy, just trying to make ends meet. These problems all require decades of work to fix. No president, technocrat, or dictator can fix it overnight. What can fix it, however, are small structural changes that play within the system. For example, industrial policy that survives administrations, incentives that reward production over rent-seeking, treating remittances as transitional, not permanent, absorbing labor domestically even if imperfectly, and accepting slower consumption growth in exchange for restructuring. Closing the gap doesn't require becoming Vietnam, because that gap has pretty much closed a long time ago. It's very much harder to become Vietnam today, with many countries being more competitive in manufacturing. But what it does require is rebuilding the link between growth and production. All in all, the Philippines of today is a nation that is teeming with talent, but in a system that doesn't serve it right. Just look at it yourself. Abroad, Filipinos are exemplary. In a sense, you could even say we run the world due to the number of core industries that depend on us, for example nursing or healthcare or seafaring. Even at home, Filipinos punch above their weight. But the road ahead is still very long. We may run the world, but we're not the ones instructing it how to run, nor are we the ones providing the tools to make it run like Vietnam is. We're simply the caretakers. A good position, but one not destined for greatness. Overall, Vietnam and the Philippines are mirrors of each other, windows into what-ifs for both. For the Philippines, Vietnam is a glimpse into not only what could have been if our politicians simply thought of long-term, sustainable, and indispensable economic growth, even if it means upsetting many people and elite structures. For Vietnam, the Philippines is a glimpse into what could have happened if it compromised or lingered too hard, liberalized too much, or shot the bar too low. The question for both is not whether they'll become developed. It's an inevitability, I believe, for most countries, or if not all. The question is, when? And for now, Vietnam is clearly ahead. If the Philippines wants to catch up, the question it should ask is not how, because we already know. Many of our technocrats in NEDA, for example, already know how to do it. The question is, who is willing to bear the consequences? Anyways, that's all from me. I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.